All right, hey folks, it's Faz here from Faz Lifts. Now, have you ever been on a fat loss diet? It's all going well, and then all of a sudden, a weekend happens, or an evening, or even some time in the day and during a week, and you just blow it. And you blow it, and it goes from one chocolate bar to another, to a bag of donuts, to God knows what else, and you don't know what to do. Perhaps that's happened multiple times over the years, and you kind of want to figure out why this is occurring, what to do leading up to that point to avoid it, what to do afterwards to get back on track. So this is for you. I'm sure we've all done it at some point. So here's some advice. All right, firstly, thanks for making it onto my channel. Appreciate you tuning in. Drop a comment down below just to let me know where you're coming from, where you're listening from. If you haven't done so already, please do hit subscribe and I'll crack on with the video. So this is a pretty common problem that happens with a lot of people. There are usually a couple of things that derail people from a diet. Firstly, it's just plain hunger. Now that doesn't happen often. Like actual true hunger doesn't really happen often. The second thing is cravings. People just get very snackish. They want something. They miss some sort of taste or texture or flavor which is missing from their diet. They just miss a certain food that they've not been eating for a while. Maybe some chocolate, whatever they've put off the menu. Maybe the diet's too restrictive. Who knows? And so they just tend to get cravey and then they just cave. So those are two ways where people basically mess up a diet. First way is just general pure hunger. Doesn't tend to happen as often. Second way, when people get cravings for things, people get snacky, that happens a lot more often. And you can probably sympathize that if you're at home yourself and you come from a background where you have dieted multiple times, or where you've gone off the diet bandwagon. You kind of thinking to yourself, why does this keep happening? And I want to explain to you why. I work with a lot of people and they come to me with these histories of eating in this manner, and they've gone up and down in body weight over the years. And they come to me and I try and explain them these concepts. So this is what I want to share with you today. All right. So firstly, after it occurs, you've got to acknowledge that this happens to everyone. This happens to everyone. So it's not like you see your favorite celebrity influencer on Instagram and you think, oh, I'm sure they're just perfect. Odds are the more hardcore you are, the more often it actually happens, because those types of people tend to do a combination of things which lead them to feeling more of a snapback. So competition bodybuilders are particularly bad for this. So they put a lot of pressure on themselves. They have very restrictive diets to get down to very low levels of body fat. It all spells for a big sort of snapback binge episode afterwards. But it also happens to the regular person. So I want to talk about the factors which influence this. Now, odds are, if you have fallen off the diet bandwagon many times before, that is generally an indicator you're more likely to do it again, at least, particularly if you stick to the same approach. So previous disposition towards falling off the diet does influence things. We know there is a genetic influence as well as an environmental influence in people who have various disordered eating patterns, and this is a type of disordered eating. Second thing is putting pressure on yourself. Having a contest deadline or special days like a wedding day or whatever, that often puts a lot of pressure on people, which then can cause them to snap back like this and go off the diet. I've seen that happen multiple times with clients and ex-clients of mine, perhaps clients who have gone for competitions. And when they're going for a competition, they have a very difficult road. Then oftentimes they've actually maintained a degree of leanness which has been fairly close to that without a deadline in mind, because the pressure's off. Now that sounds pretty nuts, but it's true. Pressure leads to self-imposed pressure leads to a lot of these things occurring. And I think the best thing people can do when they're on a diet is to acknowledge that it is going to be something that is going to happen for life. And they don't really want to attempt anything which they won't be able to sustain once the deadline is over. So this is the way I currently eat. I don't ever want to do anything right now which is going to not be sustainable for the rest of my life, because then it means that I'm doing it for a deadline. Like I have a big birthday coming up fairly soon. The way that I'm dieting now is that I don't really want to put any additional pressure on myself. I'm not going to pull out all the stops for this birthday because it won't be sustainable afterwards. And if I do that, then I feel far more comfortable in myself, and I'm able to diet without any pressure because I'm not putting pressure on myself. So that's a big thing. If you have got a holiday or a wedding or whatever okay, fine, acknowledge it, but then perhaps just take the stand that I don't want to do anything which is not going to be sustainable after the event is over, because odds are that's going to lead to pressure, particularly if you're predisposed. Next thing is the newness of the leanness. Now, this is something which isn't often talked about, but it's an interesting concept. So let's say, for example, you generally hover around 20% body fat, okay? And let's say at high school or school, or secondary school, whatever, you were 15% body fat, all right? Now, between 15 to 20, you're probably going to be okay. Now, to get down to 10% is probably going to mean that you need to move heaven and earth, all right? For somebody else, if they generally hover at 15 to 10, for them, getting down 10% would be easy. Do you see what I mean? So as an individual, the newness of the leanness makes a big difference. Also, one of the reasons why I typically don't recommend bulk and cut cycles anymore, but that's a different topic which I've covered previously. So the newness of the leanness makes a difference. Like if you want to hang around between 10 to 12, 10 to 15% body fat all year round, then it's wise to push down to that 10% at least once. If you want to be hanging around 10 to 15% body fat, I wouldn't just barely make 15, because then you'll definitely be hanging around from 15 to 20. You won't be able to sustain that 15. Give yourself a range. The newness of the leanness makes a big difference. So understand the first time you get down to contest shape, for example, it's going to be very difficult to maintain anything close to that. You'll probably snap back to where you were previously. And then subsequent times, it should get easier and easier and easier. Next thing is the sustainability of the actual diet you're using. So if you use a particularly restrictive diet, or at least one that you perceive as restrictive, like the ketogenic diet, like the juice fast, then that may well lead to you falling off the diet and having these sort of falling off the bandwagon moments. I say keto with a proviso just because some people do really enjoy it, and inherently within keto you do have a sense of appetite suppression, but the social aspects of keto can make it very unsustainable because a lot of people like carbs, frankly, so do I. So that's why I eat them. But for some people, I just want to acknowledge that keto can be a good option. But things like juice fast, cleanse, stuff like that. Also like fasting. Fasting's another one. Fasting could be a decent option if it jives with your lifestyle. If it doesn't, and you're sat there at the dinner table while everyone else is eating and you're like, God, this is murder, it's not going to work for you. So it has to be perceived sustainability of the diet. Things like a juice fast and all that kind of stuff, I mean, it's debatable how sustainable they are anyway. There is social sustainability and there is just physical sustainability. I would say a juice fast falls into the realms of things which just aren't particularly sustainable because they're not that filling. There you go. And finally, arbitrary rules. So just random things like, okay, you know what, you're on a diet where you can't eat after 6 p.m. I mean, it's 2021, but there are people who still do stuff like this. So factors which influence you falling off the bandwagon can be all 5 of these categories, all right? They're all 5 of them. Now, some of these categories you can immediately do something about, like sustainability of the diet and arbitrary rules. Other things, like the newness of the leanness, you can't generally do much about. Your previous disposition, you can't generally do much about. But in that circumstance, what you can do at least is find a different approach, and that's what I'll be talking about later in the presentation. So I want to talk about here, before we move on to that, the temptation to make it up afterwards. So making it up afterwards can be either be a good or a bad thing, depending on you as a person. Now, you'll often find that those with a good dietary track record generally respond quite well to this. So if you fell off the bandwagon on a Saturday night, for example, cutting a bit of calories out of the next week, you know, just reducing your calories down daily, a little bit, just a couple hundred calories for the next week, if you have good dietary discipline, will probably work quite well. Now, for those of you where falling off the bandwagon is a regular occurrence, don't do this. Don't be tempted to make it up afterwards, okay? Because all you'll do is you'll fall into that cycle of binging and then attempting to purge it. Because all that will happen is next time you inevitably binge, then they'll be like, okay, I'm just going to perpetuate this. I want to purge, but this time I'm going to purge. I want to purge harder. So I'm going to, rather than cut 200 calories a day, I'm going to cut 500 calories a day, which will just lead you into a cycle. And if you're predisposed to it, that is often how people get into these habits. So just don't start. So if that has been a part of your history, just decide for yourself at this point now, just don't do that anymore. If you do fall off the bandwagon, just get right back on it the next day. Don't try and make up for it. Now, next is making it up before the event. So the same rules really apply here on your own dietary history. So you'll often find, again, those with good dietary discipline tend to respond quite well to this. So let's say you have a barbecue coming up on Saturday, and generally you're pretty good with your diet, but you know this is going to be something where you want to navigate it. If you have good dietary discipline, sure, just make up for it prior to the event. Go into the event having taken off 200 calories every day for a week. Great. Go in, all good. Now, if you know you're going to struggle with adherence, if you're going to struggle with appetite, if you're going to get hungry, if those preceding days are going to cause you to go to that barbecue already hungry, then don't do it. All right? Don't do it. If there are any risk factors, don't be tempted to make it up either before or after. Just have the barbecue, get it over and done with, and then move on with your life. Or if you've fallen off the diet bandwagon, fine. Accept it, move on with your life. Don't try and make it up. All that will happen when you try and make things up is you'll just perpetuate the cycle, which potentially you've been in for years at this stage. It happens very easily. People frame it in their minds in different ways, but it happens. So, a couple of final words on this. Firstly, just relax, okay? It's a meal, it's a day, it's a weekend, it's a week, whatever it is. Just get yourself back on track at the next available opportunity. And I would say that at the next available opportunity, I think it takes a good deal of maturity to say, okay, I've fallen off the bandwagon here. I've fallen off the diet wagon this meal. I'm going to get back on my plan the next meal. I think it's a increasingly immature attitude which says, okay, I've fallen off the bandwagon this meal. I'll get back on it tomorrow or Monday or next month. You know, do you see what I mean? Like, just because you've blown it on a Tuesday afternoon doesn't mean you have to continue to blow it all of Tuesday and all the rest of the week. I've actually seen people do this on social media. I've seen so-called nutritionists post about this and say, Monday, I fell off the bandwagon. I'm going to get back on next Monday because of #acceptance. No. That's not acceptance. That is just perpetuating the cycle. Acceptance would be saying, accepted, you screwed up, cool. Don't judge yourself for it. Just get back on your plan the next meal and don't worry about it. Don't just draw it out for a week because of reasons. So whatever it is, get it over and done with. Okay, get out of your system and then get yourself back on track the following meal. Aim for the following meal. It takes a good degree of maturity to do that. And if you can do that, then in the future, if you do have a golf plan, you take a lot of the pressure off yourself because there is no pressure to just consume everything in sight for the next week. Because you know you're mature enough to get back on plan the next meal. So if that's a random Wednesday morning where you've ate something you weren't supposed to eat, get back on your plan Wednesday afternoon. You see what I mean? That level of maturity shows that you are at peace with your food options and you're at peace with yourself. Aim for that. You won't always get it, but aim for that. Secondly, reevaluate your plan. You must do this. If this turns out to be a regular occurrence, or let's just say it's a one-off which has come out of the blue. Let's say you've been dieting, you might even have a coach, okay? And all of a sudden, boom, you fall off the bandwagon and you fall off bad. Reevaluate your plan, okay? The plan should be restrictive enough that you can lose weight, right? Because you've got to restrict a little bit, right? But not so restrictive that it shouldn't be any more restrictive than that. So when I say it should be just as restrictive enough for you to lose weight, so whatever rules you need in place for you to lose weight, whether it's calories you're doing, whether it's macros, whether it's just habits, whether it's a certain style of intuitive eating, whatever it is, have it just enough that you need to lose weight, but no more than that. Okay, you shouldn't be imposing upon yourself any unnecessary restrictions. And if you think back to the first slide, I talk about all these unsustainable diets, all these arbitrary rules. A lot of that stuff is very easily fixable. I work with people with macros and calories. I work with people with meal plans. I work with people with intuitive eating styles, whatever suits the individual. But what's common with all three of those methods that I use is I use just enough restriction to get them moving and no more than that. Because anything over the necessary is by definition unnecessary. And I'll just finish with this may or may not have been a quote from Einstein, but your diet should be made as simple as possible, but no simpler. And I think those are good rules to live by, okay? You should aim to make your diet as simple as possible. Within simplicity allows you freedom to actually enjoy your food, enjoy social occasions without, and still be on track, but without putting onto yourself arbitrary random rules which don't actually help and only take away from your overall plan. So hopefully that was helpful for you. Just to summarize the problem, a lot of people have experienced this. They'll experience going on a diet and then falling off the diet wagon, not knowing what to do, getting back on the plan, potentially getting back on the plan harder next time, which just sets them up for another cycle of falling off the diet and getting back on. And people may well do that. And these aren't always microcycles. So these don't always happen over the course of a week. They may happen over the course of months. Like you may have had a great diet for 3 months, and then the preceding 3 months, the following 3 months, you put the weight all back on again. That's the same thing. It's just as bad. So if you're doing that over the course of a lifetime, say over the course of a decade, if you're going up and down in body weight, up and down in body weight, you've got to break out of that cycle. If you want to be at a certain body weight and you just keep, and it's a reasonable body fat percentage, like you're not trying to be stage ready all year round. If you want to be a healthy, 12 to 15% body fat for a guy, and you're not able to sustain it, you may well need to look at your approach. You may well need to look at your plan on how to get down there. You may well be overly restrictive. You may need to employ the services of somebody who knows what they're doing and who can help you, at least guide you and steer you in the right direction for a few months and give you the tools and give you the education to do what you need to do for the rest of your life. I would rather you do that for a few months than waste a few decades of your life just going up and down in body weight, harming your health. It's worth it, people. All right, folks. I'll end on that note. If you do want to work with me, there is a form you can click through, which you can get in contact with me on. And yeah, I'd appreciate any likes, subscribes would be fantastic. Hopefully this was useful to you guys, and I'll speak to you next time. All right, take